Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. A mysterious beginning. The hum of the airport was a familiar melody of hurried footsteps, rolling luggage, and muffled announcements. Gate 14 at Denver International Airport was bustling with activity as passengers prepared to board Flight 726 to New York City. Among the sea of travelers was a young girl, no more than 9 years old, her dark curls bouncing as she clung tightly to the hand of a man in his late 30s. She wore a pink jacket that seemed oversized, and her eyes darted around the terminal as though searching for something, or someone. The man beside her, tall with sharp features and a suit that appeared just a touch too formal for travel, seemed impatient. His grip on the girl's hand tightened each time she slowed her pace. Passengers, absorbed in their routines, paid little attention to the pair. Only a flight attendant named Elena, stationed near the boarding gate, caught a glimpse of the girl's wide, nervous eyes. Elena, in her mid-30s with a calm demeanor and a talent for reading people, had spent years ensuring passengers' comfort and safety. But something about the little girl unsettled her. It wasn't just the way the man seemed indifferent to her, it was the fleeting expressions of fear and hesitation on the child's face. As boarding commenced, the man handed over their boarding passes without a word, his expression stern. The girl, still clutching his hand, glanced briefly at Elena, her eyes silently pleading. Elena smiled warmly, but the encounter left her with a nagging feeling. She shook it off as she returned to her duties, ensuring each passenger found their seat. Inside the cabin, the little girl and the man were seated in row 17. Elena continued her pre-flight routine, helping passengers stow luggage and ensuring everyone was buckled in. When she reached row 17, the girl was sitting by the window, staring intently outside, while the man scrolled through his phone. "Hi there," Elena said softly to the girl, crouching to her eye level. "Is this your first flight?" The girl turned to her, her lips parting as if to speak, but before she could respond, the man interrupted. "She's fine," he said curtly, not bothering to look up from his phone. Elena's smile faltered for a moment, but she nodded and moved on. Yet the unease lingered. As the plane taxied to the runway, Elena couldn't help but glance back at row 17. The girl's small hands were gripping the armrests, her knuckles white, and her eyes darting around nervously. The man, by contrast, remained utterly disengaged, his attention fixed on his screen. The plane ascended smoothly into the air, and soon, the seatbelt signs were turned off. Elena began her rounds, distributing drinks and snacks. When she reached row 17 again, the man waved her off impatiently. But the girl, in a barely perceptible motion, raised her hand and subtly traced a shape on the tray table. Elena paused, pretending to adjust her tray. She watched as the girl traced the same pattern again, an H. A shiver ran down Elena's spine. Was the girl trying to communicate something? Before she could ask, the man placed his hand over the girl's, stopping her mid-motion. His eyes met Elena's, cold and unyielding. "She's fine," he repeated, his tone firmer this time. Elena nodded, her instinct screaming that something was wrong. She continued down the aisle, her mind racing. Was she imagining things, or was the girl in trouble? And if so, what could she do about it? Back in the galley, Elena shared her observations with her colleague, Marissa, a seasoned flight attendant with a no-nonsense attitude. "I think the girl in row 17 is trying to say something," Elena whispered. "She was tracing letters on the tray table, and she looks terrified." Marissa frowned. "Are you sure? It could be nothing. Kids get nervous on flights all the time." "I know," Elena said, "but this feels different. The man she's with doesn't act like her dad, at least, not like one who cares about her." Marissa sighed. "Let's keep an eye on them. But if you're really concerned, we might need to notify the captain." Elena nodded, her resolve strengthening. She decided to approach the situation carefully. Later, as she passed row 17 again, she discreetly slipped the girl a napkin with a note written on it, "Are you okay?" The girl glanced at the note, her eyes widening slightly, but she quickly crumpled it and shoved it into her jacket pocket. The man didn't seem to notice, but his body language grew more tense. Elena's heart raced. The girl's reaction confirmed her suspicions, but it also made her realize the danger of acting too openly. She needed a plan, and fast. The rest of the part builds tension as Elena tries to piece together the girl's silent plea for help without alarming the man. Her small but calculated actions, watching the man's behavior, enlisting subtle assistance from her colleagues, and deciphering the girl's signals, set the stage for a high-stakes intervention that will change everything. A whisper in the clouds. The flight had reached its cruising altitude, and passengers began to settle into their routines. Some browsed through magazines, while others scrolled on their devices or leaned back for a mid-flight nap. The hum of the engines created a soothing background noise, but for Ryan, the calm was deceptive. His thoughts kept circling back to the peculiar girl in row 12. Her timid demeanor, the anxious glances she cast at her father, and most unsettling of all, the fleeting hand gestures that seemed purposeful and urgent, they weighed heavily on his mind. Ryan had learned to trust his instincts in his years as a flight attendant, and something about this situation felt wrong. Standing near the galley, Ryan leaned against the counter, pretending to check the inventory while keeping an unobtrusive eye on the passengers. He was not alone in his concern. Jessica, his colleague and a seasoned flight attendant, noticed his unease and approached him. "Ryan, is everything okay?" "You seem distracted," Jessica said softly. Ryan hesitated before responding. "I'm not sure, Jess. There's a girl in row 12, she's young, maybe 7 or 8. Something's off. She keeps looking at me and making these strange signals with her hands, but it's almost like she's hiding them from her dad." Jessica frowned, her brow furrowing with concern. "Do you think she's in trouble?" "I don't know yet. Her father seems indifferent, but there's a tension there. I can't put my finger on it." Jessica placed a reassuring hand on Ryan's arm. "Let's keep an eye on them. If you need backup, I'm here." Ryan nodded, grateful for her support. As Jessica returned to her duties, Ryan decided to gather more information. He picked up a tray of beverages and snacks and began his rounds through the cabin, moving purposefully toward row 12. When he reached Mia's seat, her father barely glanced up from his phone, giving a curt shake of his head to decline the offered refreshments. But Mia seized the moment. With a quick glance to ensure her father wasn't looking, she tugged at Ryan's sleeve, her small fingers gripping the fabric tightly. Ryan crouched down, meeting her wide, tear-filled eyes. She leaned closer and whispered, "Please, help me." The plea was barely audible, but the desperation in her voice was unmistakable. Before Ryan could respond, her father shifted in his seat, his attention momentarily drawn to their interaction. Mia immediately withdrew, sinking back into her seat and clasping her hands in her lap. Ryan straightened, forcing a polite smile as he moved on, but his heart pounded. That brief encounter confirmed his worst fears. Mia was in distress. Returning to the galley, Ryan quickly jotted down notes on a napkin, piecing together the details. Mia's quiet plea for help. Her father's disinterest and controlling behavior. The secretive hand signals. He needed to act, but he also needed to tread carefully. Confronting the father directly could escalate the situation, putting Mia at even greater risk. Ryan's gaze flicked to Jessica, who was serving coffee to a passenger. Once she returned, he quietly briefed her. "We need to find a way to talk to Mia alone," Ryan said. "She said she needs help, but I can't get much from her with him right there." Jessica nodded, her expression serious. "What if we use the restroom as a cover?" She could step away from her seat without raising suspicion. Ryan considered this. It was risky, but feasible. "I'll try to create the opportunity. In the meantime, let's alert the pilot. We need law enforcement waiting for us when we land." Jessica agreed, and Ryan headed to the cockpit to inform the captain. Captain Andrews, a composed and experienced pilot, listened intently. "If this girl is in danger, we'll do everything we can to ensure her safety," the captain assured him. "I'll contact air traffic control and arrange for authorities to meet us at the gate." Ryan felt a surge of relief. Having the captain's support was crucial, but he knew there was still much to do. Back in the cabin, Ryan noticed that Mia was fidgeting in her seat. Her father, oblivious as ever, remained absorbed in his phone. Taking a deep breath, Ryan approached row 12 again, this time with a pen and notepad. Feigning a friendly demeanor, he leaned down toward Mia. "Would you like to draw something?" he asked, handing her the notepad and pen. Mia hesitated, her eyes darting to her father. Sensing her hesitation, Ryan added, "It's okay, just a little something to pass the time." Her father glanced up briefly, shrugged, and returned to his screen. Relieved, Mia took the notepad and pen. Under the guise of doodling, she quickly scribbled 2 words, "Help me." Ryan's stomach clenched as he read the message. He nodded subtly to Mia, giving her a reassuring smile before moving on. In the galley, Ryan showed the note to Jessica, who immediately grew pale. "This is serious, Ryan," she said. "We have to act now." "I agree. Let's stick to the plan with the restroom," Ryan replied. Jessica discreetly passed Mia a whispered message during her next round, "When you need the restroom, signal us." Minutes later, Mia tugged at her father's sleeve, asking to use the restroom. He waved her off dismissively. Seeing her chance, Jessica guided Mia to the lavatory, where Ryan was waiting just outside. Inside the cramped space, Ryan knelt to her level. "Mia, can you tell me what's going on?" "I need to know so I can help you," he said gently. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she whispered, "My dad took me from my mom. He says we're going far away, and I'll never see her again." Ryan's heart ached for her. "Do you know where your mom is now?" Mia shook her head. "She was crying when he took me. I don't know how to find her." Ryan reassured her. "You're very brave, Mia. I promise we'll get you back to your mom." Mia nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and hope. Back in the cabin, the tension grew as Ryan and Jessica prepared for the final phase of their plan. They kept a close eye on row 12, ensuring Mia was safe while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. As the plane began its descent, Ryan made a final check. The authorities were ready at the destination, and the crew was primed to assist. The weight of responsibility pressed on him, but he was determined to see this through. The landing would be the turning point, an opportunity to separate Mia from her father without raising suspicion. Ryan knew he had to act with precision and care. Little did he know, the most challenging moments were yet to come. The descent of courage. The flight began its descent, and the mood in the cabin subtly shifted. Passengers stowed their belongings, tightened seat belts, and prepared for landing. Ryan, however, was bracing himself for a confrontation he hoped to avoid but was ready to face if necessary. Mia remained in her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her father occasionally glanced at her, his expression unreadable, but his demeanor had shifted. Whether he sensed something was off or was merely exhausted, Ryan couldn't tell. Jessica discreetly checked on Mia during her final cabin walk. She gave the girl a warm, reassuring smile and a subtle nod as she passed. It was a small gesture, but it seemed to steady Mia's trembling hands. Ryan moved to the galley to coordinate with the captain one last time. The authorities were confirmed to be waiting at the gate. The plan was clear: law enforcement would board the plane immediately upon landing, allowing the crew to facilitate Mia's safe removal from the situation. But Ryan knew things rarely went exactly as planned. As the plane touched down and taxied toward the gate, Ryan noticed the subtle shift in Mia's father. His shoulders tensed, and his grip on his phone tightened. He looked out the window, then toward the aisle, as if calculating something. Ryan's instincts flared. Whatever this man was planning, it wasn't good. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began gathering their belongings. Ryan signaled to Jessica, and they took their positions near row 12, ready to intervene if necessary. As Ryan moved closer, he noticed Mia's father reach down, pulling a small duffel bag from beneath the seat. His movements were quick and deliberate, and Ryan caught a glimpse of something unusual: papers, possibly documents, that he stuffed hastily into the bag. The confrontation. "Excuse me, sir," Ryan said, keeping his tone neutral but firm. "We'll need all passengers to remain seated for a few moments as we finalize some safety checks." The man froze, his eyes narrowing as he looked up at Ryan. "Why?" "We've already landed." "It's standard procedure, sir," Ryan replied calmly, his heart racing. Mia's father shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the cabin. He seemed to realize that Ryan wasn't going anywhere and leaned back in his seat with a begrudging scowl. Mia sat frozen, her eyes wide as she watched the exchange. Ryan gave her a brief, reassuring glance before turning back to the man. The arrival of authority. The sound of the boarding door opening was Ryan's cue. Within seconds, 2 uniformed officers entered the cabin, their presence commanding immediate attention. They walked straight toward row 12, their expressions professional but serious. Mia's father stiffened, his hand tightening around the strap of his bag. "What's this about?" he demanded, his voice rising. One of the officers addressed him calmly but firmly. "Sir, we need you to come with us for a brief conversation. Please gather your belongings." The man's gaze flickered between the officers, Ryan and Mia, as if trying to calculate an escape route. Ryan stepped slightly closer, positioning himself protectively near Mia. "She's my daughter," the man said suddenly, his voice defensive. "I have custody." "This is a mistake." The officer's tone didn't waver. "We can address that, sir, but we need to ensure everyone's safety. Please cooperate." For a moment, it seemed as if he might resist. The tension in the cabin was palpable, and passengers began whispering among themselves. Finally, with a sharp exhale, the man stood, slinging the duffel bag over his shoulder. He cast a dark look at Ryan before turning to follow the officers. Reuniting the pieces. Once the man was escorted off the plane, Ryan knelt beside Mia. Her small frame was trembling, and tears streaked her cheeks. "It's okay, Mia," Ryan said gently. "You're safe now." She nodded but didn't speak, her hands clutching the armrest tightly. Ryan reached out, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. Jessica appeared with a soft blanket, draping it over Mia's shoulders. "We'll stay with you until we find your mom, sweetheart," she said warmly. As the last passengers disembarked, a woman rushed into the terminal, her face pale and frantic. Ryan immediately recognized the resemblance. This was Mia's mother. The reunion was both heart-wrenching and heartwarming. Mia's mother collapsed to her knees as Mia ran into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Ryan and Jessica stood back, tears in their own eyes as they witnessed the moment. The mother looked up at them, her voice breaking. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you for bringing my baby back." "No thanks needed," Ryan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Just keep her safe." A whisper of hope. Later, as the crew prepared for their next flight, Ryan reflected on the day's events. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing they had made a real difference. In his years of working as a flight attendant, Ryan had seen countless faces and heard countless stories. But Mia's quiet plea for help was one he would never forget. Sometimes, he realized, it wasn't about flying passengers from one destination to another. It was about being there when it mattered most, about listening to the whispers in the clouds and answering them with courage. This flight was not just a journey through the skies, it was a journey of hope, bravery, and the power of human connection. Healing takes flight. The terminal buzzed with the noise of arriving and departing passengers, yet it felt as if time had frozen around the small reunion happening just beyond the jet bridge. Mia clung to her mother, her sobs muffled against the warmth of her embrace. Her mother's tears fell freely as she whispered words of comfort, running her fingers through Mia's hair as if to reassure herself this moment was real. Ryan and Jessica stood a respectful distance away, their hearts heavy yet full. The scene was as raw as it was beautiful, a reunion born of courage and determination. After the storm, the authorities lingered nearby, briefing Mia's mother on the next steps. Legal paperwork needed to be processed, and counseling was recommended for Mia to help her process the trauma. Her father was in custody, but there would undoubtedly be a lengthy legal battle ahead. Ryan caught fragments of the conversation but focused on Mia, who had calmed down enough to glance in his direction. Her small hand reached out toward him, and without hesitation, he stepped forward. "You saved me," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the noise around them. Ryan crouched to meet her gaze. "You're the brave one, Mia. You found the courage to speak up. You saved yourself." Her lip quivered, and she threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. For a moment, Ryan didn't know what to say. He simply held her, hoping she could feel the strength and reassurance he wanted to give. When Mia finally pulled back, she managed a faint smile. "Thank you." Ryan returned her smile, his throat tight with emotion. "You're welcome, kiddo. Now go be with your mom. She's missed you so much." The unsung heroes. As Mia and her mother were escorted away by social workers, Ryan and Jessica returned to the plane, now empty and eerily quiet. The adrenaline that had carried them through the ordeal began to fade, replaced by exhaustion. Jessica broke the silence first. "You know," she said, leaning against a seat, "we didn't just land a plane today. We landed someone's future." Ryan chuckled softly, the weight of her words sinking in. "I think we're in the wrong business," he replied. "Maybe we should look into crisis counseling." Jessica laughed, a sound that lightened the mood. "Are you kidding? This is exactly the right business. Every day, we're entrusted with people's lives. Today just happened to remind us how much that really means." Ryan nodded, his gaze drifting to the window where the airport lights twinkled against the darkening sky. She was right. Their job was so much more than serving drinks and ensuring safety protocols. It was about being there in the moments that mattered most. Ripples of hope. Word of the incident spread quickly among the airline staff. By the time Ryan and Jessica finished their shifts, their colleagues greeted them with quiet nods of respect and gratitude. Later that night, Ryan sat in his small apartment, scrolling through the notes he'd jotted down in his journal. It was a habit he'd developed years ago, a way to reflect on the lives he encountered in his work. He wrote, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a whisper in a crowded cabin, a child's plea for help amidst the hum of engines. Today, I learned that bravery isn't reserved for the heroes in capes, it's in the smallest of voices asking to be heard. And when we listen, really listen, we can change lives. Maybe even save them." As he closed the journal, his phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. "Jessica, heard they've already started a fund to help Mia's family with legal fees and therapy. You in for the first donation?" Ryan smiled and quickly typed back, "Always." 1 year later. The airport felt different that day, filled with a sense of déjà vu and anticipation. Ryan adjusted his tie as he walked through the terminal, wondering if they would recognize him. He reached the gate where a small, intimate gathering was taking place, a group of airline employees, local journalists, and a mother-daughter duo who had come to express their gratitude. Mia, now a year older and noticeably more confident, greeted Ryan with an enthusiastic hug. "I've missed you," she said brightly. "I've missed you too, Mia," Ryan replied, his heart swelling at how much she had grown. Mia's mother stepped forward, her eyes shimmering with tears. "You didn't just help us that day," she said. "You gave us a second chance. There aren't enough words to thank you for what you did." Ryan shook his head, humility in his voice. "I just did what anyone would do." Her gaze softened. "Maybe. But not everyone does it." Taking flight once more. Before they parted ways, Mia handed Ryan a small card. Inside was a hand-drawn picture of an airplane flying above a rainbow. Below it, in carefully written letters, was a single sentence. "Thank you for being my hero in the sky." Ryan tucked the card into his pocket, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced before. As he boarded his next flight, he glanced out the window at the vast horizon. Somewhere out there, countless others like Mia needed someone to listen, someone to act. And Ryan knew, with every fiber of his being, that he would always be ready. Because heroes weren't just found in comic books, they were the ones who chose to act when it mattered most, even if all they had was a pair of wings and a compassionate heart.